Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Richard Waring. I'm a member of the PoemWorks community and delighted to have you here this evening. Uh, I would like to start out with a few quotes, as is my usual m mode of being. The first is by a fellow named John Wojtkiewicz. He writes, I write poetry because I don't like fishing, but I do like casting a line into the void and throwing most of what I catch back. I think that's a pretty good proposition. Sharon Olds says of writing poetry, you know, when you have something that you long to say to someone and you could never say it to them to their face, then here's a place, poetry, where you could speak. I find that very salient. And finally, and I love this quote from Stanley Kunitz. The first job of the poet is to create the person who will write the poem. In other words, the poem waits for the poet to
Right.
become. Well, tonight we have two wonderful featured poets. Uh, our first is Varon, who is a social worker and writer. She's the author of two children's books, My Brother is Not a Monster, a story of addiction and recovery from 2021, and a kid's book about overdose, 2024. Her poetry has been published in various journals. Please welcome Lee.
Thank you so much, Richard, and thank you to the PoemWorks community and to my dear friends that are here tonight. So I'm going to be reading from my new book, which I will put in the chat. It's called The Last Bed. And basically, poetry has always been therapeutic for me. I've written some other books, and they were likewise very therapeutic. And this particular book spans actually several decades when my older son was dealing with substance use disorder / addiction, and I was on that journey with him. And I'll read from each of the three sections. The three sections are entitled At the Soup Kitchen, The Last Bed, and Birds. But I would say that birds feature in all the sections because birds were always sort of like my happy place. Watching birds, I could remove myself from some of the stress and storm that was going on with dealing with my son's addiction, and
Hmm.
they were very important to me. So the first poem in the section At the Soup Kitchen is called Extinct. It has an epigraph from Lucille Clifton, one of my favorite poets, which reads, so many images have fallen off the edge of the world. Extinct. This is where they used to roam, the ivory-billed woodpecker. Through mangroves, their missing palms, a tinny trumpet flicker. Fallen off the edge of the world into this shimmering void, a silence unfurled into another forever destroyed. 100,000 souls overdosed last year. Who remembers the shape of their hands, their lost poems that feed vanishing ghosts, the stars that braided strands of their hair? In 1935, someone recorded the ivory-billed bird. And what of these others? Unheard.
Wow.
So, as I said, I volunteer at a soup kitchen. I have for decades, actually. And as you can imagine, many of the people that come into soup kitchens are struggling with drugs and alcohol. And this is dedicated to a young woman who died at just 24. And I got to know her quite well. And her name was Colleen Conway. The title of the poem is I Know Your Name for Colleen, 1989 to 2013. I know your name now. I know you have no place to sleep tonight. I know you're so anxious you can't come and sit with the other guests, so I bring you a meal to go. Don't give her money, someone says. I give you chicken, rice, and orange. Your beauty is dissolving into night, smack, snow, taking you. Heroin is white, but your lips are blue, and blue is seeping into the room where you passed out last week, the room where your head hit the floor, blue dust wafting from the ceiling, oozing from the floorboards, soaking your clothes, blue like your scarred veins, pleading for oblivion. At the end of your life, a blue question mark. So being involved in addiction / substance use disorder, you can imagine death is sort of omnipresent and always hovering. This poem isn't directly about addiction, but it does speak to that. It also has an epigraph. It's called What Happens. The epigraph is Cam kills first is studying Comanche at Comanche Nation College. Only 25 people nationwide speak Comanche, down from about 15,000 in the late 1800s. What happens? What happens when a language slowly dies? Is love spoken differently? Hate? Does the blue bowl shining on the table shine differently or simply disappear? I heard in Mexico there are only 2 people alive who speak Ayapaneco, the true voice, and they're not speaking to each other. What disappears in the space between them, besides sunflower stalks and evening's gray moths? There are different ways to say death. All are permanent. So the middle section is called The Last Bed. And as I said, it's quite autobiographical. It has to do with my journey dealing with my son's addiction. So I'd like to read a couple of those. The first one is called Kindergarten. First day of kindergarten, in your sweater vest, clutching your dinosaur lunchbox, smile wide. Who was to know that Tyrannosaurus and Triceratops would take over your life, ravenous, unforgiving, and me clutching my camera, trembling at the world you are about to enter. This poem is called How Many Times, and it sort of refers to the many different places my son was to treat his addiction. And at one point in the graduation of one of these places, he had to run a 3-mile run as the final task, and that was the graduation. This is called How Many Times. The sky cracks like a broken fortune cookie. Is this your life's final draft, shuddering in a homeless shelter, dope sick? Can't you go back, put in another tape? At the wilderness program, they drove you into the desert where you camped for 6 weeks, lost your name, became coyote, sparked fires from juniper bark. I rented a car, drove 90 on deserted roads, dodging rabbits at dusk. After running 3 miles, you crossed the finish line. How was I to know there is no finish line? Endless detoxes, holding tanks, walls scoured of graffiti, cigarette butts overflowing coffee cans, locked doors, transition centers, halfway houses where drugs still seep in and tears await. As I sip from the straw of hope, following the filigree of an angel's wing. And so as anyone who has a loved one with substance use disorder knows, there are a lot of, it's like a roller coaster. Things can get calm for a while and then they can go back into sort of chaos. But this was a poem written at a relatively calm time when I was driving my son to a halfway house. Thanksgiving. This Thanksgiving, you're sober. Your words aren't slurred, eyes aren't bloodshot. You and your brother tease me about my driving. Slowly, I reach our destination, out past Holyoke, Lee, Hudson to Millerton. Silos, still groups of cows and sheep, replace shopping malls, service areas. Hemlock, fir, and white birch replace maple and oak. Breathing replaces the clenched chest, strained muscles. I walk into the shadowed hills just for today. But sometimes those complex times don't last. This is called Going to the YMCA. You leave your Red Sox cap on the dining room table this chilly spring day. I take you to your new room, room 1155 at the West Side Y. The windows won't open, glued shut around the AC unit, a deterrent to suicides. From the 11th floor, a line of yellow taxis careens down Broadway. You fall on your cot, eyes closed. A circle of fluorescent light tinges your skin green. On a scrap of paper, you copy a list, names, birthdays of friends, family, for safekeeping, you said. I'm glad you can't see my face as I walk away. So as I said, birds figure into a lot of my poems, and this is called Nighthawk, and I'll raise my hand when I some of the text is in italics, and it's from a book. So Nighthawk. Some pictures in my bird book, circa 1949, are missing. You've been missing for a long time. Even when you were here, you were missing. I bring back no words from my sighting of you at night crossing 72nd Street. In my book, the nighthawk is missing. The nighthawk is constantly in the air, flying in a zigzag pattern. You, sleepless and hollow-eyed, crossing 72nd Street, falling down the metro stairs. Unseen, I watch you. Nighthawks dive and bank as they feed on flying insects. You, diving and banking as you move forward like a low-flying bird in the crepuscular evening. Both display cryptic coloration, gray, white, buff, blue, mottled, now deleted from the pages of my life. And this is called Tattoos. It has an epigraph from E. E. Cummings, which reads, "Love is the voice under all silences." Printed on your skin, tattoos, blue, green, gold sleeves encircling your arms, ghosts of the departed, Laura, R.I.P. in blue letters, and Happy, your roommate in Long Beach who never smiled, found with a needle in his arm, Match.com flickering on the screen. This lost assembly where love exhausted, love derailed is still love. A hum between syllables under everything, love torn yet still love. Love whispers under all silences. And the title poem is called, the title of the book is called The Last Bed, and this poem is called The Last Bed. And again, there's some text in italics. I'll raise my hand. The Last Bed. Driving to Boston Medical, you vomit in a plastic bag. I keep my eyes on the road. You're shaking, the car shakes, stars even shake. No, this isn't the first time you've blinked back from death. After 10, I stopped counting. The intake worker calls around. No beds, no beds, maybe one bed in Worcester. You know there's an epidemic, he sighs. Past midnight, a young man stumbles in, despair smoldering in the creases of his jacket. Any beds? I want to bury this man beneath the unplowed snow. Doesn't he know the last bed is yours?
Clara's going to read.
How many times has his mother buried him?
Had a good nap. Open this, please. Had a very short nap. Come on.
I think there's some
You mute, please.
Okay, so I'll start up again.
Please.
How many times has his mother buried him? Outside, stars swirl faster. I want that bed. That bed is ours. I scream, don't scream. The worker coughs, tells the man, you'll need to go to a shelter. Come back tomorrow. I know his tomorrow may never come, but through blood and splinters, I gripped the edge of the last bed. Wow. This is called Moments. They say geographical cures don't work. I was learning the wrong language all along. I took you to a cottage beneath black palms, orange raspberries beneath our window, sweet jasmine curling into crushing hope. You surfed silver highways looking for something never found. Did the language of love and addiction intersect somewhere? I sold the cottage and came home. When I returned, it was plowed under. Even the black palms gone. Jasmine came to remind me we'd had moments of happiness. And let's see. The last poem in this section is called At the Garden on Your 8th Anniversary of Recovery. You wait for me as I greet our oak, our Carolina wren high in the branches. At the garden, wild strawberries redden beneath a tangle of green, among lettuce and small clumps, yellow tomato flowers, all beckoning, waiting. Years ago, we sped our bikes around this pond, crashing against each other as we barreled into our lives. How many years not talking, barely talking, arguing, accusing, then just missing? I watched for a bird I thought would never arrive, just as I thought you'd never make it to 40. We water the garden, home for pizza, salad, dessert, this bowl of wild strawberries. So the final section is called Birds. And I think I'm going to read actually a poem called Geese, which was in the Red Letter Poems. And I don't know how many of you are familiar with that. The former Arlington poet laureate, Steve Bertiner, has been doing this for years. And he sends out a poem on Fridays, and anybody can sign up for it. It's called the Red Letter Project. And this is called Geese. And it's in the current Red Letter Poems Project. And again, it has an epigraph, and I can't pronounce the Polish poet's name very well, but it's sometimes a long dead friend stops by for a while. Wisława Szymborska. Sorry, I butchered that probably. Geese. I climb into the branches. I climb into the branches and disappear into the white pear blossoms for a while. I listen to the low honking of geese flying through opaque clouds for a while. I pretend your hand turning the doorknob as you come to see me will last for a while. And the last poem I'm going to read is Vigil with Hummingbirds. Vigil with hummingbirds. At night, their photos are projected on buildings. We hold our lit cell phones to the black sky and pray. Someone loved each, washed their dead bodies in dreams. They want you to remember their names, their faces, before the addictions set in. To know they'll return like hummingbirds, fly through the missing pages of our lives. Thank you so much.
Wow, Lee, that was really very moving.
Thank you,
As
Richard.
somebody who has a son who nearly killed himself with alcohol, uh,
Oh,
this is very important work.
you can relate. I'm sure, yeah.
Really glad that, I mean, it's so hard to write as well because anything that happens to your child is happening to you in a big way. Uh,
Yeah.
but really, kudos for your clear-eyed perception and continued loving. Uh, and I'm glad that it's come to a, a really nice conclusion. Keep them close.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Well, I just want to mention that next month, the first Friday of the month, we will have Elizabeth Lund, who has worked with Gray Held on the annual Newton Poetry Project, Newton Haiku Poetry Project, where they put up winning haiku, I think 24 or so, all over Newton. And she's going to be reading with Sarah Epstein. And now, please welcome Clara Silverstein, who is the author of the poetry collection Above the Fall Line, which I think she will put in the chat to order. It's from Finishing Line Press, a historical novel, and four nonfiction books. A second edition of her cookbook, The Boston Chef's Table, is forthcoming in 2025. Her poems have appeared and been nominated for a Pushcart Prize and have appeared at Boston City Hall and in Blackbird, the Patterson Literary Review, Chautauqua, and other journals. She teaches at Grub Street and has worked as a journalist and historian and program director of the Chautauqua Writers Center. Raised in Richmond, Virginia, she lives in the Boston area where she has taken workshops with Barbara Helfgott Hyatt and Gray Held. Please welcome Clara.
Thank you, Richard. And thank you for organizing this series month after month. I know it's a hard job and it's really wonderful how many people you've brought in. Also, thank you, Lee, for that very powerful reading. You're a hard act to follow. So, as mentioned in my biography, I am from Richmond, Virginia. And one of the things I like to do is return to the past. So you'll be hearing about history in lots of different ways, some in Richmond, some in Boston. And when I was growing up, I was really at the very difficult intersection of social justice through school desegregation and the old Confederacy in Richmond. So you'll hear a bit about that tension.
Mm-hmm.
I want to start with something more fun, though. This is a poem I wrote after I heard that Tupperware had filed for bankruptcy earlier this year. And Tupperware was started in Massachusetts. Many of you don't know that, but there is a historical connection here. Homage to Tupperware. Remember our wonder, our gullibility, when all it took to organize the kitchen was a set of containers made of polyethylene, no longer needed for gas masks, available to us courtesy of Earl Tupper, who patented the burping seal for bowls, cups, and cake carriers. So many variations to sample that we dressed up for demonstrations in someone's living room, exulting in sugar, butter, cooking oil back on the market after rationing, all put in its place, coffee and wonder flowing as we dreamed of everything leak-proof in our new subdivisions, reliable capsules stacked up for generations. This is a found poem, and it kind of goes with the Tupperware era. Beauty products, 1960s. You can make your face smooth as cream, your lips lusciously covered in frosted fool's gold or forbidden fruits. Pick a shade that clings. Pencil your brows to soft, dark wings. Shadow your whole lid bold. Sweep up the top lashes. Every girl can be wide-eyed. Oh, go ahead. Give yourself new allure. Look how men will flock around.
Hmm.
And as Gray mentioned, I have written a cookbook. The second edition is coming out in 2025. It's about recipes from Boston chefs. I've written a couple other cookbooks, and I love to write about food. So I've been having some fun working with old recipes. And I, in the title, talk about what era they come from. They are historical. To bake apples, 1760. From the barrel down cellar, choose a Rome beauty. Anoint each slice with a store of sweet butter. Strew sugar upon it, a good thickness. A quarter of nutmeg grated. Roll the crust. Wet the edges. Crimp. Inhale the dear scent. Try not to ache for back home across the heave of water. Give thanks for the harvest, an orchard red and gold. Take the pie down the lane, past thorn bushes etched with frost. Give it to your neighbor. And when I read that some college students were making fudge in the dorms in the 1890s, I had to write about this. Fudge, 1893. When the house mother slept, my roommate pushed aside lessons in mathematics, pulled out the flask of brandy. We sipped and passed while I readied supplies. Heat-proof dish, half cake of chocolate, alcohol burner smuggled from the chemistry lab. We sang The Cat Came Back until the mixture thickened and purred, stirred it smooth, spread on a dining hall plate. Oh, how illicit each sliver of sweetness, obedience abandoned, fingers licked clean. So now we are going to go to Richmond as promised, and we're starting with a tour of the state capitol. And most of you know Richmond was the capital of the Confederacy. It fell in 1865 and precipitated the end of the Civil War very soon after that. Tour of Capitol Square. From this height, the guide says, Richmonders could see blue troops warming up through streets, burned when the city fell in 1865. Boots pummeling ashes, burdened wagons creaking. Yankees took it all. Smoldering tobacco, smashed barrels, gutters of whiskey, this grass on the hill. Refugees huddled in tablecloths, sacks, as broad stripes and bright stars spurted above the business district. Nothing left but a pall of smoke and rubble. After Richmond burned in 1865. My grandfather saw the sun rise, red as a welt, over charred brick, facade of a ruined mill, windows gaping like eye sockets, above a business district that would be rebuilt to sweep him in, black hat in hands, at the unveiling of Confederate statues. He put a rebel flag in his lapel to trade with the wounded and the proud, until the Depression spit out his business, sent him off the third-story balcony, and my grandfather, shamefaced, to the tobacco factory, where he sorted leaves, his breath an ember in his throat. In wartime, my mother stirred rationed sugar into her tea, the bag always reused, with monogrammed silver spoons left over from prosperity. At my school, in the asphalt heat of the playground, girls told me, "Get lost." So I ran past camellia bushes in my mother's yard overgrown. At supper every night, her face like concrete. Across the Huguenot Bridge, the metal railing where I fell in love with the roar and vertigo of the James River. Past the dance hall where I skulked in the raucousness. After my boyfriend left, wandered Broad Street, chicken and ribs joints, vacant lots, where I wove through cones in driver's ed until I learned enough to speed away, camshaft churning, everything slammed inside my car, heading north. My cousin will appreciate this poem. It's about an ancestor, Uncle Ed. Beneath a Ronald Reagan Man of the Year poster and a grandfather clock that bonged the hour, he held court from the striped sofa. Arms waving, wild turkey sloshing, he'd argue and opine, forever asking me to enunciate. In his heyday, he put up pickles in Crocs on the back porch, sailed to Spain in a sloop, skied Aspen and the Alps. He centered the world beneath the dining room's bead and wire mobile, his family orbiting about, chattering and teasing until each one spun away, leaving him at the core of the Mulberry Street homestead, where nieces and nephews, grand and great-grand, trekked for a dose of bric-a-brac. Another kind of history here about my great-grandmother and her family. Whitewash on concrete walls. My great-grandmother disembarked in Baltimore, mouth pinched above a lace collar, hungry for a new language. I was given her name and only one word of her native tongue, Nine. This is her world sealed off. Whitewash on concrete walls, a bakery, a fabric store, a sanitarium. The lake shaped like a feather. Hills of Württemberg humped to the horizon. Cousins in the cemetery, geboren, gestorben, Jewish star, Hebrew prayer, their synagogue torched on Kristallnacht. So now we're moving into the civil rights era. And the background information to know here is that this poem is actually set in Chicago, where we lived in the same neighborhood that the Obamas lived, and it was fully racially integrated even in the 1960s. Kiddie Pool, 1965. At 5, I played Ring Around the Rosie with neighbors who raced over, kids with arms black as a wet street, water beating their hair, while my blonde curls turned stringy, all fell down. When grandmother slid open our screen, stepped out, flowered hem bobbing below knees, looked and gasped as water rinsed off us, mixed together, seeped into the lawn, where mother calmly filled a bird bath with the hose and father weeded tomatoes. I thought she'd pinched her finger, slamming the door. And this is about my 5th grade teacher. She was one of the first Black teachers to come to my elementary school when desegregation started. And this poem was a winner in the National Baseball Poetry Contest just this past year, 2024. Power Hitter. From the bench, I stopped daydreaming when Miss Stokes stepped up to the plate in her collared dress and heels. I hushed with the other fifth graders. Tapping the bat once on the asphalt, she faced a pitcher just learning the curveball. The fielders moved back as Miss Stokes swung and missed, losing her footing. Then she hit a fly ball that soared past everyone's gloves. We all clapped. Her pinch runner dashed like she did in gym class, but what was the hurry? Miss Stokes pushed back her glasses and smiled in a way she never did in class. When she kept her brown face blotted with powder, her voice clipped, sent me out in the hall if I doodled in the textbook, adding mustaches to the out-of-date faces of the first U.S. presidents. Who cared if George Washington had false teeth? I wanted to read about Hank Aaron and Willie Mays, each with 3,000 hits and counting. Miss Stokes had to play by the book, but when she batted, I glimpsed where I wanted to go. This is a field trip where I was the only white child in the class, and we had to visit a Confederate battlefield. Field trip. My white face a boulder, too heavy for even the nicest kids in class to try lifting on the school bus. So I huff against the cold window, tracing hearts with a forefinger on fog, bangs across my eyes like drawn curtains. Everyone jostling 2 and 3 to a seat, Sly and the Family Stone crackling from a radio in a coat pocket. Everyone jiving until Mr. Freeman stands, palms forward. Y'all hush up now. At the Malvern Hill battlefield, I stand ashamed among the others, bones smoothed over, grass sown, then mowed. And this is one of the strange parts of the 1970s. My cousins owned a home near a newly built nuclear power plant, Lake Anna. Past the barricade on the 2-lane road, we wade into the engineered lake, its water still warm from the reactor's core. We lie back, let it soak the sweat from our scalps, buoy us as we backstroke under a cobalt sky, crickets clicking in low grass like Geiger counters on the brand new shore, surrounded by acres of sagging wires, fields of meadowsweet, parched, where lines of corn once reached. And I live to tell the tale. So we are finally up in Boston. I'm going to end with these 2 poems. The first one, Why I Moved to Boston. When I'm talking about Dunkin' Donuts, you'll probably recognize this, but I don't name it. Why I Moved to Boston. What's mine I built from squares and rotaries, eyebrow windows and dovecotes, striding in tough boots that stand up to slush and salt, lacerations of snow in my face, servers rushing through my coffee order. What's regular? What's not? I wanted to leave languor, gouged out war trenches, the mansion my grandfather built and lost to the bank, crepe myrtle trees with bark that peeled like scabs. A blue line highlights the route I follow now, thicket of roads and riverways. I can turn off, lose myself. Running the Boston Marathon the year after the bombing. Each of us a sum, hundreds of numb miles of training, now giving way to lacy light and road, more road, crosswalks, greensward, bright bursts of daffodils, hot stretches, intractable miles, asphalt slants up, heartbreak I've expected all along. At last, sea air rushes in, rushes out. An American flag, tall as a 3-masted ship, curtains the finish. Every breath an incantation, every cheer a response, reclaiming our city's joy.
Mm,
Thank you.
wow. Awesome. Wow, that was great. I really love the Hegelian way in which you combine history and poetry and geography and biography. Uh, Really wonderful, wonderful reading. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Yeah, there's much more to be written about Boston for sure. Mm.
Yes, yes, indeed. Okay, up next we have the open mic, and we only have 6 readers, so if anyone wants to read a second poem, I welcome that. And first up, we have Sara deBeer.
Yeah, so as we said earlier, I'm Clara's second cousin. And as you were reading, Clara, I kept flipping my poems around. I was like, oh, I could tell this one. I could read this one. So these go out to you. Um, the first one is batting practice. I grip the bat, right hand on top of left, feet firmly placed just as my dad showed me. I'm on the patch of grass we've agreed to call home plate. A hit is better than a foul, but a foul is better than a whiff because if I miss the ball, I'll have to throw down the bat and chase the ball as it rolls down our driveway toward the street. A quick glance at first base, the maple tree, then a nod to show my dad I'm ready. It's a good day. There are invisible runners at the maple tree, the magnolia bush, and the corner of the slate path that leads to our front door. A line drive could bring them all home. But no luck. A pop fly is easily caught by my dad. The batting practice is over.
Nice.
And this one is, I'll read it, and maybe Clara in the chat can clarify for me a little bit here, but it's called The Trouble with the Taffy. Each winter of my childhood, Uncle Clarence, whoever he was, sent far too much saltwater taffy. The trouble was not the waxed paper wrappers, nor the unfavorite flavors, strawberry, spearmint, licorice that glared at us from their vast glass taffy jar as they grew tougher and harder with each passing day. The trouble with the saltwater taffy was it was not the pralines that Uncle Clarence sent to my parents. Pralines, rounded, golden brown caramels, each crowned with a single perfect pecan. Every year, I'd be granted one soft, sweet, sublime taste, as if being allowed one glimpse of heaven. Throughout the year, I pray to the one who was Uncle Clarence that he'd realize I'd outgrown the saltwater taffy, discover I was worthy of pralines. One year, while I was still a child, no box arrived. Now that I am grown, I search in vain for a praline that can match my memory of those rounded golden brown caramels. My only hope is that someday I'll round the corner and there he will be. Uncle Clarence. He'll say, "My, how you've grown," and hand me a box of pralines, each with its single perfect pecan crown.
Excellent.
Wonderful.
So Uncle Clarence was our great-grandfather's brother. This family had, I think, well, he had two marriages and there were like 8 kids or something from the two different marriages. So yeah, I guess he sent a Christmas present every year or a holiday present.
We were up in Albany, New York, so the Southern family might send stuff at Christmas time.
Perfect.
Thanks for clarifying, Clara. Clara, Clarence, clarifying. Thank you all for letting me join you.
A food poem and one of the food groups, chocolate. Excellent. Up next, we have David Miller.
Okay, hi everybody. I just sent well, first of all, I want to thank Lee and Clara for your readings, and I just sent something actually in the chat, maybe everybody sees. Sarah, if you're not on the mailing list, this is physical mail for the Vermont Country Store. You should subject yourself to that because they send out these catalogs that are like if you were a little kid, as I was, when you get the Sears catalog in, there's all these toys. Now it's like pages and pages and pages of classic sweets claimed to have rediscovered from wherever. Anyway, you might want to check that out. Okay, enough intro. This is titled Swimming in the Year 2000. My mother's laughter and my wife's pop at the same instant. Sun-warmed chlorine scent lifting from a pool beneath the pines. Something amuses them both at once. In seconds, I saved on an esoteric mini-disc, harvesting daily life on cryptic digital pits. Where is that disc now? Where's the playback? Their voices chime together in my memory. Neural pixels fade, as do untended discs. There's the sound. Two women's laughter. Bits of light on water behind my eyelids. Mother's voice, 11 years before her silence. My wife and I still swap our ordinary sounds, sighs and hmms and whoopies, hand in hand. Thank you.
Terrific. Thank you, David. Up next, Ruth Hoberman.
Just need to unmute. Okay, thank you. So I'm going to read a poem that's about atrial fibrillation. And I used to think everyone my age knew what this was. It's a heart condition where you get an arrhythmia that is not deadly, but it's not great, and it feels kind of strange. And recently I was told that solar storms may trigger it. And so I had to write a poem as soon as I saw this headline about solar storms and atrial fibrillation. It just means one of your heart valves is kind of wiggling, and so you feel a little short of breath. Upon learning that solar storms may trigger atrial fibrillation, forget skin. Nothing blocks cavorting solar flares. Ions blow down, and electrified air flows into bodies uncontained. We're electric, as Whitman knew, our obscurest intricacies driven by sparks. Or overwhelmed, as when my heart surrenders sense, wavers into disarray, no longer mine, but skies and suns moved by their plan, not my own. I'm trying to relax. I'm trying to believe there is no death, only this wild stir of atoms my heart's part of, the night I'll vanish into, stunned off kilter by kinetic charges. Look at me, breathless, atilt, cardiac doors ajar. Thank you.
I can so relate to that, Ruth.
I have a number of heart condition poems, so we
Well,
should talk.
we'll have to compare notes. Up next, Steve Nickman.
Thanks, Richard. Unmute. Okay. Thanks, Richard. And what a wonderful reading tonight from everyone. This is called Galatea. And just a word of background. There was a sculptor in ancient Greece named Pygmalion who wasn't too impressed by the women that he knew. So he carved the statue of a woman. And it was so beautiful that he fell in love with it. And he called it Galatea. And it came to life. Galatea. Your voice is melodious with a hint of age, probably in your 40s, professional, perceptive. I've heard it so often, I feel I know you. I admit I've fantasized since I've lived alone. 5'2", a pantsuit, hair in a bob, a green leather bag from Coach. You'll take charge of the piles of stuff in my apartment. Get rid of my worn-out clothes. Make me omelets. Bring me out of my shell. We'll walk in the arboretum, watch old movies on the sofa, read the paper on Sunday mornings over coffee and croissant. Just one thing gives me pause. Your concrete way of thinking. Call from Bozeman, but call from probably fraud.
Thank you, Steve. And now please welcome Thrassos Calligas.
Hi, everybody, and thanks to the people who read. I have been working with a young man with a very severe addiction and multiple hospitalizations and near-death experiences, and I really related to some of those Lee's poems. Richard, did you say we can read 2 poems?
Yes.
Okay, so the first one is called Morning Commute. In the slow traffic of School Street, I see them, the boy about 3, old enough to walk with serious intent, holding his father's hand. The car moves no faster than they do. The father stops, lets go, and checks his phone. The boy looks around, makes eye contact. I think he waves. He could be my son at 3 or 4. Did I hold him enough? Did he get? Did I give enough? I want to park, get out, get closer. His small hand out and up searches for his father's. I think, take his hand, take his hand. In the other poem, is a short one, but has 2 footnotes. One is Yanis Ritsos is an estimated Greek poet, and Edmund Keeley is a translator who's translated Seferis and Kavafi, and a wonderful translator. When we make love, remember that Tuesday after Keeley's talk on Ritsos, when he cried reading Moonlight Sonata? We felt so close that night, and you with all your questions about grammar and aorist tenses, telling me how you get stuck in the past perfect, irregular verbs impossible, the pluperfect gives no gain, and the future just never works out. When all I wanted is for you to whisper to me in bad Greek.
Wonderful. Thank you, Thrassos. Well, I will wrap things up with a couple of poems, a recent journey that I took to the Galapagos Islands. Blue-footed booby. Nothing prepares for the blueness of the booby, its outlandish stance. Bright flocks bombard a school of fish. Their anatomy is agile. Permanently closed nostrils allow them to eat well while underwater. The male puts on a comic dance for his blue-footed mate, up on one foot, then the other, clownishly. On bare Galapagos rocks, his blue shimmer reflects off his soft white belly. If the blue satisfies her, she rewards him with 2 white eggs they both guard under the equatorial sun and the watchful stare of stars. And of course, Galapagos tortoise. A tortoise moves slow as a stone on legs, his carapace gathering lichen. He slips into water to dine in time-stopped action, hunger a dance among refugees from extinction. Some live more than a year on their backs in ships, no food, no water, waiting to be eaten. One born in Mozart's time died only recently. 8 strong men were needed to lift him from the ground. I watched a giant saddleback extend his neck so finches could feed on parasites. Mating is difficult, awkward conjoining to behold. The female rises on her hind legs, the male lifts his shell over her. In this way, the vulnerable parts can give and receive. Well, what an evening. Oh my goodness. Heartbreakingly beautiful and beautifully heartbreaking, I would say. Comments, anyone? Let's give a round of applause for all of our readers. Nice.
As always, great to spend the evening here. Yeah. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you,
Thank
Richard,
you all.
for
It was a
organizing us
pleasure.
all.
Mhm.
Yeah. And thanks to everyone for listening.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Good night.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye.
Good night.
Stay strong.
Yes.
Have
Well,
a good night.
Um, Richard, I just wanted to know the last poet who read, what was his name? I love those poems, but I didn't catch.
Thrassos,
Thrassos.
Oh,
Spell that?
thank you. Mhm.
Thrassos Calligas. He's
Mhm.
G-R.
Thrassos, Thrassos. And
Thank you so much.
Yeah, oh, that's great.
I'm in Gray's workshop.
Oh,
Mhm. Mm, good.
Thank you all.
thank
Good
you.
night. Yeah.
take
Thank
care,
you.
everyone.
Mhm. Good night. Mhm.